Hey everyone, it's Shauna coming at you a few days after the live. Here is an edited version of the live workshop. I've cut out the beginning stuff where I'm trying to figure out technical things, and I've shortened the end as well. Also, the primary reason I'm doing this is because I left a slide out on accident. I must have skipped past it, and it was a very important slide. So I'm going to insert that at the end where it goes as well. I'm going to move on because anybody who's actually watching this not live is going to be very annoyed. Hi, this is who I am. You'll probably see this at the beginning of most of these. Legal stuff. This is not medical advice, mental health advice, any of that stuff. This is not personalized advice. This is general recommendations. Don't start anything without appropriate approvals first. Good deal. All right. Nutrition is one of those topics I can get really heated about because unfortunately the term nutritionist is a little bit of a sticky one. When it comes to, especially online, I see a lot of people talking about nutrition and I have no idea what their credentials are, and I'm all for like sharing lived experience. However, food is chemistry and it's complicated. And so beyond sharing things that are, widely recognized and understood, it can get a little dicey. So if you're taking or looking for reliable nutrition advice, I would definitely look for the letters R or L in their credentials. It usually stands for registered or licensed something. Again, nothing wrong with sharing information about personal experience, but food is, I have a registered dietitian somewhere in my family. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of like organic chemistry. It's complicated because our bodies are complicated. So just make sure if you're looking for like personalized meal plans, things like that, it's somebody who not only is credentialed, but also understands your body because again, things like any medical condition can affect all sorts of nutritional needs or complications. So that's the biggest one is, I see a lot of people call themselves nutritionist and really, and, if you're not like licensed or certified by something that precludes you from doing that, you kind of can call yourself a nutritionist, which brings me to, as a certified health coach, what is my scope for nutrition? I'm not going to read over all of these. And I will say with a lot of these slides, I'm not going to read over everything. They're here. You can read them at your leisure. But essentially what I'm able to do is relay information that is, widely accepted and evidence-based. So principles of healthy nutrition, food that is part of a balanced diet, how nutrients impact our body, deficiencies, things like that, and then how nutrition requirements change through the life cycle. Just to note a couple of things that I am specifically precluded from doing based on like my actual certification. I can't do like nutrition assessments for people, individualized meal plans, recommending, prescribing, selling nutritional supplements, cannot recommend supplements. So this is one I see a lot online. I'll see people who I think are credentialed or certified recommending supplements for things that are not widely accepted. And that always raises a red flag for me because I'm very clearly prohibited from doing that. So just really quickly. And then this is the one. Oh no, you can't really see the Apple thing very well. That's okay. I have this up here because I'm not sure how much I can show. I don't want to have like a Jennifer Lopez situation on my hands, but I watch Beyonce's Coachella homecoming performance a lot when I do cardio. And, I just want to talk about how easy it is and how like widely spread misinformation is when it comes to even just the most like basic of things. There's this scene where it's B-roll film of Beyonce just eating an apple, like at, behind the scenes, whatever. And then she's doing a voiceover and she's talking about her preparation for Coachella. And she's saying, sorry, the weird noise, that's a roller under my foot. And she says, this is a little triggering, but she's basically talking about being restrictive with what she's eating. And she says, as she's eating an apple, she says she's not eating sugar and she's not eating carbs and she's hungry. Apples are primarily carbohydrates, which carbohydrates are basically sugar, and we'll get to that later. There's just so much information about even the most basic things when it comes to macronutrients, which are the nutrients our bodies need in the largest amounts. Foods are not monolithic, so most foods have a combination of carbohydrates, fat, and protein. Typically what people do is they just like whatever the main thing is in it, they'll call it that. Now an apple, it's a little hard to see. An apple is mostly carbohydrates, but they are primary sources of energy. Like that's how things function. And it's also, we need carbohydrates to build muscle. So in the little handout that I gave, if anybody wants to fill this stuff in, you can, or if you want to do your own version of like what it is and what it isn't, because I think we all have in our minds things that we think these are and what they're actually not. So, fat's job is to store and provide energy. It's our second source of energy. It helps us absorb fat soluble vitamins. And it provides cushion for our internal organs. So we need adequate levels of fat. And then protein, this is the one that always like everybody's so focused on eating protein. It's important, yes, but not more important than the others. Everything works together. So protein is muscle and tissue repair and rebuilding, production of hormones and enzymes. Again, this is very, we're just keeping it like high level here. So in terms of without any other medical, conditions, just a regular diet, we should be eating about 45 to 65% carbohydrates, and then 20 to 25% fat, 10 to 30% protein, and percentages of, what you're eating, percent of total what you're eating, which is the average macronutrient distribution range. So that is when I see people saying like, eat 20% carbs, I'm like, but why? So this is what it is. None of these are inherently bad by themselves. And they all work together doing different things. Okay, so now let's do a little myth busting, because I like this. Because I'm not just going to run through like, I don't know, I'm not just going to do nutrition. All carbs are bad. No. So like I already said, carbs are energy. It's our primary source of fuel, period. But also our brains. It is the primary source of fuel for our brains. They need that glucose to go. So, carbs are okay. And then carbohydrates are a combination of naturally occurring and added sugars, fiber, and starch. See a little bit of that later. Really quickly, I just want to touch on this, not to be fear mongering or anything, but people talk about the keto diet, which is called keto because it's supposed to put the body into ketosis, which is essentially a state where we start using our ketones as energy instead of glucose. And if you don't fully know what that means, probably shouldn't be eating a keto diet, which is why food is complicated. But that is one thing in and of itself, but it can also lead to ketoacidosis, which is much more common with folks who combine the style of eating with like fasting or just generally don't have nutritious habits otherwise, like maybe sensory issues and eating other things are a struggle, and if you have type 2 diabetes. So just some things to be careful of when people villainize carbs like they're the worst thing ever. So, and then ketoacidosis is basically when the body isn't able to produce insulin at the rate that it should, because things have been thrown so out of whack, and that's not good. We don't want to do that. So another myth, all sugar is the same and all sugar is bad. Also not true. Sugar or monosaccharide is there are different, like we could go into, and this is again because I'm giving just the high level. There are kind of like 6 main types. The 3 base types are monosaccharides. Glucose is like the main chain through all of them because glucose is our primary source of energy. So glucose is one type. This is like the kind of sugar you'll find in plants, many other things. Fructose is another type of sugar. Fruits, juices, honey, galactose, dairy, fruits, vegetables. Disaccharides are basically a combination of monosaccharides. So you can see lactose, maltose, and then sucrose, just a little bit of math there. So again, just nuance. And you know, the glucose in plants, it's all sugar, they're all carbohydrates, they're all energy. Another one I see a lot is just eat a ton of protein because of dopamine, which sort of true, but setting aside the whole like throwing everything out of whack, the other thing is that it's not just the protein. Like protein is made up of a combination of amino acids, which a lot of people you'll hear like the building blocks of protein. That's what they're very typically called. There are 20 of them total, 9 are essential. Our body cannot produce them on its own, but it needs them. 11 are non-essential. Our body can produce them on their own. When it comes to dopamine, there's really 2 that are the main ones for dopamine production, and it's phenylalanine, which you've probably heard of for other things. That's an essential, our body can't produce it. And then tyrosine. And you've probably heard a lot of people talk about L-tyrosine supplements for dopamine production, and this is why. So is it protein that helps with dopamine production? Yes, but I like nuance, and the nuance is it's actually these amino acids. And that's also, again, why people will talk about like the L-tyrosine. Okay, all fat is bad. This might also be less common with, I'm not sure, I don't want to speak for any other generations, but I think as like an older millennial gen, and especially like older millennials and Gen X, you know, we grew up with the very like the low fat diets and that kind of stuff. So just, you know, we've already talked about what fat's job is. And beyond that, not all fat is bad. There are 2 types of fats that have a negative impact on cholesterol and then, or, you know, heart clogging. And then there are 2 types that have a positive impact on cholesterol. So they can kind of be doing this at all times. So we want to theoretically avoid trans and saturated fat if we're trying to not raise our bad cholesterol. We want to try to eat more within reason of the poly and mono unsaturated because it will raise our good. I'm going to just check in and see if there's any, make sure there's like no comments or anything. It's probably just, okay, good. It's nice there and sunny. Okay, good. It's just me and you. I love it. Okay. I'm not going to go through all of these. This is a little carousel that I did for a different social media account a long time ago. But when it comes to the types of vegetables, the couple of most important things are vegetables are categorized based on the nutrients that they have. And so there are 5 of those main categories. It's red and orange, legumes, starchy, other, and dark greens. But here's the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, like beans are vegetables. Well, you know what I mean? Like kidney beans, garbanzo beans, like these are technically vegetables. And so I know a lot of us, when we think of, you know, potatoes are technically vegetables. Oftentimes we're thinking just, you know, dark green or red, orange, whatever, but there are a lot of other things that technically count as vegetables. And I don't know, I guess I just kind of geek out because I think that that's kind of cool. So there's going to be more with this in a little bit. And then I'm not going to talk too much about fruits, mostly because fruits are typed based on their seed structure. And I'm not a botanist. That's not my thing. So if anyone's interested, this is essentially the main categories, which I pulled from this link here. But yeah, you can see they're categorized based on their seeds, essentially, which is also how when people are like, well, tomatoes are fruit. Yeah, it's both because they're categorized differently. Fruits are categorized based on their seed structure. Vegetables are categorized based on their nutrients. So, it's like the Venn diagram. Anywho, let's talk about, this is something everybody focuses on, macronutrients, with the exception of a couple of micronutrients. So let's talk about vitamins and minerals, which are micronutrients. These are the things that don't directly provide energy, but are important for other physiological processes. There's a couple of things I just want to note here. I'm going to send, you'll see. When you look at this, first of all, I just want to show that there are a lot of things that are involved in the same processes. And so one of the things that drives me a little bonkers about social media, especially, is when I see something and it's like, this one thing is a magic cure for all these things. And it's like, well, there's a lot of stuff that does, like, a lot of things do a lot of things. So this is a really interesting list to look at. And so here's vitamins, kind of what foods, where you can find them. And then moving over to minerals, I just want to mention electrolytes are another thing. And I think this is something I hear about a lot because I hear from a lot of people who have POTS and they have to be really careful about their electrolyte balance. But just really quickly, electrolytes are minerals, and they do affect a number of bodily processes. That's our balance of hydration, nervous system, and muscular functions. And so it's really important to have enough electrolytes. For anyone who doesn't have a medical condition, typically we are only at risk of losing too many electrolytes when we sweat really quickly or we hydrate too quickly with something that doesn't contain electrolytes. Like if we're just drinking a ton of straight water, not really eating anything in between, we're going to be at risk of throwing off that balance. And that's where water toxicity comes into play. So, just don't go chugging 64 ounces of water in a short period of time. Like this is why it is toxic, because of partially because of this imbalance. So these are the primary micronutrients that are, or the primary minerals that are technically electrolytes. So, a lot of those like sports drinks, they'll contain these. You'll also see them containing sugar because glucose is an energy, it restores energy. Because obviously that's made for somebody who's exerting a lot of energy from sweating. So these I'm going to send this PDF to anybody who wants the slides, because it really is like there's a ton of information on these. And I'm working on a Google spreadsheet that's interactive. So you can kind of sort between and say like, here's what I'm looking for. These are the vitamins and minerals that do that. Or here's the food. Here are the vitamins and minerals and what they do. So I'm working on something with that. If anyone's interested in more about just magnesium alone, because that's the one micronutrient everyone seems to care about is magnesium. There's like a free download. And then just putting this out there, myplate.gov, it can be a little bit triggering because it's definitely not anti-BMI, but they really do have a ton of resources when it comes to like recipes and shopping lists and being able to just look for and find ideas with all sorts of different dietary restrictions and some really interesting stuff. Okay, now let's move on to the nutrition basics for some fairly common chronic illnesses. So type 2 diabetes. I'm not going to talk about type 1. It's, the root causes of those are completely different. They're managed completely differently. Type 1 is not in my wheelhouse. We're just going to talk about type 2. So the most important thing is, monitoring the impact of different carbohydrates on your blood glucose with your medical team. So it's not for me to say like, these are safe carbohydrates for you to eat. I have no idea. Generally speaking, want to avoid simple sugars, which rush the bloodstream, and opt for things that are complex carbohydrates. So these are going to be things that enter the bloodstream more slowly because they have something in addition to glucose. So they're going to have also fiber or usually fiber to help it slow down. So whole grains, starches, potatoes, these kinds of things. And then just eating whole fruits, and I think that's supposed to say whole foods and vegetables. I'll change that. Whole foods and vegetables if possible, because they have phytochemicals, which kind of like antioxidants, except phytochemicals are removed from the whole foods once they go through processing. And I'm not an anti-processed food person. However, science has shown that phytochemicals have a positive impact on blood glucose for type 2 diabetes. And the other thing just worth mentioning, it's not nutrition, but it is also very specifically mentioned that stress management is an important part of managing type 2 diabetes. And then let's talk about blood pressure or hypertension. So again, for anybody who has POTS or suspect you have POTS, none of this is diagnostic. These are only if you know you have these things already. But the best way for hypertension is, people have probably heard of DASH. It's the dietary approaches to stop hypertension. So again, we're just talking about, increasing fruits and vegetables, fiber, protein, low-fat dairy instead of regular dairy. Sorry. Reduce saturated fat. That again is the fat that raises our bad cholesterol. And then reducing sodium and limiting alcohol. And then there are some other, this was from my coaching textbook, but some other interesting, it's a really terrible photo, but just foods and nutrients and their proposed effect on blood pressure in case anyone is interested. And then also worth noting, 30 minutes of aerobic activity per day, most days of the week. Okay, and then cholesterol. I don't know why I like these the LDL and HDL guys. Dyslipidemia. I don't know. I always feel like I say that wrong. I know you're going to see a lot of themes: increase fruits and vegetables and whole grains, low-fat dairy instead of regular, limit added sugars. So again, when we talk about added sugars, I'll get there when we look at nutrition labels, because added sugars gets a little complicated. Limit red meat, saturated and trans fat, again, the ones that raise the LDL. But this is really important. Specifically, don't rule out the good fats, the ones that raise HDL, because, again, everything in the body is trying to compensate. And so ultra low fat diets have been shown that they can cause the liver to compensate and produce more LDL because it throws things off. So balance, nuance. All right. And then this one, let's talk about arthritis, joint pain. And really the goal of this, for managing arthritis, is reducing inflammation. So these are kind of the main things when we want to, reduce joint inflammation. Omega-3 fatty acids and fish, which I kind of make a face. I think if you have sensory issues, fish tends to be kind of like, you're either really on board or you're definitely not. So omega-3 fatty acids, and then antioxidants and phytochemicals and vegetables. Again, you see the theme. They're all they all go together. And then the unsaturated oils, and an easy way to remember this is they're like the nuts and seeds. So olive oil, avocado oil, grapeseed oil, and then just regular nuts and seeds, and beans and legumes. So these are kind of the main things that can really help with reducing inflammation. And there has been like promise with vegetarian, vegan eating patterns and green tea to help with joint inflammation, but sometimes I don't love using those terms for the eating patterns, but that's what it says, so that's what I'm relaying to you. So there's that information for you. And the other thing I do want to note, I talked about electrolytes, but especially when it comes to reducing inflammation, I mean, for anything, but especially reducing inflammation, hydration is really important. And again, the right hydration with electrolytes, but hydration is just incredibly important for inflammation, joint pain, and just chronic pain in general. And I know it's like, yeah, that sounds really basic. I know, because unfortunately, sometimes that's the stuff that is just what it is, you know? And then nutrition labels. So on the handout, I just have space in there in case there's anything that you were like, oh, I didn't know that. So I just want to run through a couple of these and point out some of the things that I've talked about in other areas. So if specifically, let's look at the cereal one, the one all the way on the right. Under total carbohydrate, you'll see it has total carbohydrate 44 grams, dietary fiber 4 grams, because remember we said carbohydrates are fiber plus sugar plus naturally and added sugars and starches. So dietary fiber, sugar is 20 grams, other carbohydrates 20 grams. That means added sugars. That's their way of saying added sugar. So when it says sugars 20 grams, that probably refers to the raisins in this particular cereal, because raisins are fruit. So that's the naturally occurring sugar in the fruit and the grains, whatever. Then the sweetener that all those flakes are coated with, that's the other carbohydrate, that's the added sugar. So these are and that's why I said like the 6 main types of sugar, we're not talking about high fructose, and there are lots of sweet things which can all fall under other carbohydrates or added sugars. So when you see on a label sugars versus added sugars, or sugars and other carbohydrates, if you're looking to just reduce the amount of added sugar that you're like refined sugar, added sugar, that's what I always think is the biggest thing. Like, because what are you going to do? You're going to go, unless you have a medical reason to avoid sugar and fruit, there's nothing wrong with eating naturally occurring sugars within moderation. So don't be afraid when you see sugars on labels. If you're trying to avoid refined because they make you feel like crap, or you have to for another reason, just focus on the other carbohydrates or other sugars. And then just a couple other things, like under total fat, you'll see it's got the saturated, trans fat, polyunsaturated, monounsaturated. So again, they're pretty much always in this order where the bad ones are at the top. So the saturated and the trans are the ones that usually we want to avoid if we're trying not to raise cholesterol, bad cholesterol. Yeah, and then the only other thing I wanted to mention, and these don't have it because I couldn't find one that did. The ingredient list on whatever you're looking at, the ingredient list is in order of, it's in order of like amount. What am I trying to say? So whatever whatever has the largest amount of the ingredient, that's the first thing listed, and it goes down that way. So that's just something to note depending on what you're looking for or looking at. If you look at the ingredients, the first thing is like not what you think you're looking at. That's the majority of what's in there. So yeah, that's that. And what else? Let me see. what's our next one? Let me just make sure we don't have, I'm sure we probably don't have questions, just to make sure. Okay, good. This is a big one because it's like, yeah, that's great. I know that fruits and vegetables are really good for me, except they're expensive and or I hate eating them, which all very valid. So here are a few suggestions, things that I have done, I have suggested for clients, and I know that other people have done. In terms of cost effective, keep in mind frozen is often the same, if not better quality than buying fresh in terms of like nutrition. So, you know, whatever you can get on sale, if you like the frozen, nothing wrong with doing that. Canned is also perfectly fine. The nutrition is still there for the most part. Just try to get without added sugars or salt, depending on, you know, your specific needs. And then if you do like eating fresh vegetables, generally, you know, eating in season is when things are least expensive. There are a lot of different websites where you can go to find out what's in season. And then, and I don't know, like I'm not a green thumb, but I know a lot of people who do, like even just on a little patio, they'll grow a few seasonal plants of things that they enjoy eating. And I don't know, I think that that's kind of the direction a lot of people are moving in. So if you like the novelty of that kind of creativity, that's an option. But yeah, and then also depending on where you live, like local farms and farmers markets are also usually a lot less expensive. And if you don't know, if you have any, usually like city websites will have information, local libraries. I always tell people like your local city council, your local district office of your members of Congress, like this is literally what they're there for, is to help you locate these kinds of services and different things in communities. So again, I understand that's not going to work for everybody everywhere in the country, but just some options. And then another thing I love are like little ethnic grocery stores in your area. You know, we've got a couple of like a small Indian family owned store, and they have just like amazing produce, spices, and this is pretty common. So check those places out, and you know, it's always nice to give money to them instead of others. And so like the big box chains. And then just some things like if you just, you know, yeah, but I just hate them, also kind of relate. I think one thing that I always encourage people, and for myself, like treat yourself like a toddler, treat yourself like a child. Like it's okay to hide things in your food, the fruits and vegetables, like they don't have to be the star of the show. Grind them down, put them in smoothies, make soups, salsas, dips, like whatever, you know, I don't know what you're like. For me, sometimes it's a texture thing. And if I change the texture of it, I can do it. There are certain things where it doesn't matter. It's just never going to work for me. So I think I spelled hummus is wrong, but you know what I mean. I'm never going to advocate for somebody to force themselves to eat something that they really don't like. And I definitely know, especially if you have certain food issues, once you get something in your mind sometimes about something you're eating, I get it. It's like you can't get it out of your mind. I'm not saying to fight that. Don't fight that. What I am saying is within reason, like I don't love spinach, but if I like chop it up and hide it in certain things, I don't know it's there and it's really nutritious, so I'll do that. It's just figuring out those little things, like what are the things I can do for myself and where can I sneak nutrition in that it's you know, not basically gaslighting yourself, but helping. And yeah, just again, things like hummuses and bean dips and just lots of ways to, I don't know, grind it all up and sneak it in there. And then also, just another suggestion, if texture is a thing, like eating frozen fruit. You can eat your fruit frozen. You can pull out a bag of, you know, frozen blueberries and just eat them like that. Like it doesn't, I think that's one of the things is we're so conditioned in a lot of ways to think like it has to be this way. you know, whatever floats your boat, I think my mom used to say. In the first workshop, I talked about dimensions of well-being and how these relate to our overall health and quality of life. And following up with that, I also wanted to talk about the social determinants of health as well as other barriers, which was supposed to be a discussion we were going to have. These are the things that have the greatest impact on health. They are employment, support systems, and access to healthcare. And then for discussion, I was going to say, what are some others? The reason I bring this up in this current workshop is because our ability to both understand nutrition as well as seek adequate nutrition relies heavily on a lot of these factors and barriers. And through at least knowing what they are and having an understanding of how they can impact us, we can hopefully try to address some of those barriers as best we can. This is why I did a whole slide related to trying to get nutrition in cost-effective ways, as well as trying to get nutrition when you have various sensory issues with food, because these are two common barriers, at least for me, and I know for many others. And I think this is also really important to acknowledge because I think oftentimes we put so much stress on ourselves about how we feel and our overall health and well-being. And when we look at it, yes, there's a lot that we can do to try to help ourselves, but we have to acknowledge the systems around us and the confines that we have to work within. If anyone has questions, comments, anything like that related to this part, feel free to leave them below. Also, feel free to send me an email if you have questions. My email should be linked up in the stuff. And that's kind of it. So again, I just wanted this to be a little bit of an overview. There's always free downloads in my snip feed link, which is here in YouTube. It's linked in YouTube. And then other stuff coming this month will officially, it's almost done. The anti-BMI, anti-BS health, fitness, and nutrition. And then, yeah, some new stuff on the website. And I think that's about it. Let me hit escape. Let me stop sharing my screen and I can just see you. Okay. Hey, let's chat for a minute. About the sugars and other carbs. That the sugars were the added sugars. Yeah, no. So, and this is where I think, I should read so it says that's interesting about the sugars and other carbs on the nutrition labels. I'd always thought the opposite, that the sugars were the added sugars. Yeah, and this is why, again, it's like, how would anybody know this? But yeah, it can be really sneaky and sometimes they don't, it'll just say sugars. And so you have to know if what you're looking at is something that contains a naturally occurring sugar. And again, that's why I think it's important to at least have an idea of those 6 types of sugars, if nothing else, because then at least you can look at it and say, okay, well, I'm looking at something that's dairy. It says sugar. It doesn't say added sugar. That's probably the lactose that's in it because I know dairy has lactose. So, yeah. Very interesting. I don't know. I don't know if there's a lot of questions about this. The guide, when it's done, I'll go into a little bit more detail about some of the amino acids and some of that different stuff. I didn't want to get too into the weeds on that with that stuff today. But yeah, oh wait, hold on. I was really bad about how do I just want to do like, hold on, let me see something. Yeah, this is what I need to show. Okay, hold on. Let me share this one. Share the screen. Okay. Here's what I was gonna say. The next workshop. I'm so bad at, like really bad at this. Okay. Hey guys, mark your calendar. Next workshop. Hopefully I won't have things come up and have to move it, but I'm gonna try to stick with, for the most part, the first Sunday of the month. So yeah, will be Sunday, June 6th. It's going to be somatic release for people who struggle to physically process emotions and feel their feelings. This will be similar to the presentation I gave in January, back at that seminar, if anybody caught that. But won't be exactly the same. It'll be a little bit different. And it'll be free, and you can watch it anytime for free instead of having to pay for it later. Yeah, so that will be next month. Bye.